Start. MTC 219, number 18. Dear parents and students of Douglas School. Douglas School. As you know, our school was built over 150 years ago. 150. While we are proud of our school's history, the facilities are not exactly what they should be for modern schooling. Thanks to a generous donation to the school foundation, we will be able to start renovating those parts of our campus that have become outdated. We hope this will help provide our students with the best education possible. I'm writing to inform you that the auditorium will be the first building closed for repairs. Students will not be able to use the auditorium for about 1 month while the repairs are taking place. We hope that you will understand how this brief inconvenience will encourage community-wide benefits for years to come. Sincerely, Vice Principal Kyla Andrews. Kyla Andrews. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 219, number 19. Evan's eyes opened wide and his mouth made the shape of an O, which happened whenever something surprised him. Evan, oh. You don't mean we're leaving Sydney? He asked. His mother had just told him they were leaving Sydney for his father's work. But what about school? Said Evan, interrupting her, a thing he knew he was not supposed to do but which he felt he would be forgiven for on this occasion. Evan. And what about Carl and Daniel and Martin? How will they know where I am when we want to do things together? Carl, Daniel, Martin? His mother told him that he would have to say goodbye to his friends for the time being but that she was sure Evan would see them again. Evan. Say goodbye to them? Say goodbye to them? He kept repeating himself, sounding more and more anxious with every repetition. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 219, number 20. Without guidance from their teacher, students will not embark on a journey of personal development that recognizes the value of cooperation. Left to their own devices, they will instinctively become increasingly competitive with each other. They will compare scores, reports, and feedback within the classroom environment just as they do in the sporting arena. We don't need to teach our students about winners and losers. The playground and the media do that for them. However, we do need to teach them that there is more to life than winning and about the skills they need for successful cooperation. A group working together successfully requires individuals with a multitude of social skills, as well as. While some students inherently bring a natural understanding of these skills with them, they are always in the mind. You need to teach these skills consciously and carefully, and nurture them continuously throughout the school years. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 219, number 21. The creative team exhibits paradoxical characteristics. It shows tendencies of thought and action that we'd assume to be mutually exclusive or contradictory. For example, to do its best work, a team needs deep knowledge of subjects relevant to the problem it's trying to solve, and a mastery of the processes involved. But at the same time, the team needs fresh perspectives that are unencumbered by the prevailing wisdom or established ways of doing things. Often called a beginner's mind, this is the newcomer's perspective. People who are curious, even playful, and willing to ask anything, no matter how naive the question may seem, because they don't know what they don't know. Thus, bringing together contradictory characteristics can accelerate the process of new ideas. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 219, number 22. Too many officials in troubled cities wrongly imagine that they can lead their city back to its former glories with some massive construction project, a new stadium or light rail system, a convention center, or a housing project. With very few exceptions, no public policy can slow the tidal forces of urban change. We mustn't ignore the needs of the poor people who live in the Rust Belt, but public policy should help poor people, not poor places. Rust Belt. Shiny new real estate makes up a declining city, but it doesn't solve its underlying problems. The hallmark of declining cities is that they have too much housing and infrastructure relative to the strength of their economies. With all that supply of structure and so little demand, it makes no sense to use public money to build more supply. The folly of building-centric urban renewal reminds us that cities aren't struck. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 219, number 23. Many marine species including oysters, marsh grasses, and fish were deliberately introduced for food or for erosion control, with little knowledge of the impact, and shellfish have been intentionally introduced all over the world for aquaculture, providing food and jobs, but they can escape and become a threat to native species system function or livelihoods. Atlantic salmon are reared in ocean net pens in Washington State and British Columbia. Washington State, British Columbia. Many escape each year, and they have been recovered in both saltwater and freshwater in Washington State, British Columbia, and Alaska. Washington State, British Columbia, Alaska. Recreational fishing can also spread invasive species. Bait worms from Maine are popular throughout the country. Maine. They are commonly packed in seaweed which contains many other organisms. If the seaweed is discarded, it or the organisms on it can colonize new areas. Fishing boots, recreational boats, and trailers can pick up organisms at one location and move them elsewhere. MTC. Good job. Start. MTC 219, number 24. Before the fancy high-rises, financial headquarters, tourist centers, and souvenir peddlers made their way to Battery Park City, the area behind the World Trade Center was a giant, gross landfill. Battery Park City. In 1982, artist Agnes Deans decided to return that landfill back to its roots, although temporarily. 1982, Agnes Deans. Deans was commissioned by the Public Art Fund to create one of the most significant and fantastical pieces of public work Manhattan has ever seen. Deans Public Art Fund, Manhattan. Her concept was not a traditional sculpture, but a living installation that changed the way the public looked at art. In the name of art, Deans put a beautiful golden wheat field right in the shadow of the gleaming Twin Towers. Deans. For Wheatfield, a confrontation, Deans and volunteers removed trash from 4 acres of land, then planted amber waves of grain atop the area. Wheatfield, a confrontation, Deans 4. After months of farming and irrigation, the wheat field was thriving and ready. The artist and her volunteers harvested thousands of pounds of wheat to give to food banks in the city, nourishing both the minds and bodies of New Yorkers. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 219, number 26. Patricia Bath spent her life advocating for eye health. Patricia Bath. Born in 1942, she was raised in the Harlem area of New York City. 1942, New York City, Harlem. She graduated from Howard University's College of Medicine in 1968. Howard 1968. It was during her time as a medical intern that she saw that many poor people and black people were becoming blind because of the lack of eye care. She decided to concentrate on ophthalmology, which is the branch of medicine that works with eye diseases and disorders. As her career progressed, Bath taught students in medical schools and trained other doctors. In 1976, she co-founded the American Institute for the Prevention of Blindness, AIPB, with the basic principle that eyesight is a basic human right. 1976, AIPB. In the 1980s, Bath began researching the use of lasers in eye treatments. 1980 Bath. Her research led to her becoming the first African American female doctor to receive a patent for a medical device. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 219, number 29. Organisms living in the deep sea have adapted to the high pressure by storing water in their bodies, some consisting almost entirely of water. Most deep-sea organisms lack gas bladders. They are cold-blooded organisms that adjust their body temperature to their environment, allowing them to survive in the cold water while maintaining a low metabolism. Many species lower their metabolism so much that they are able to survive without food for long periods of time, as finding the sparse food that is available expends a lot of energy. Many predatory fish of the deep sea are equipped with enormous mouths and sharp teeth, enabling them to hold on to prey and overpower it. Some predators hunting in the residual light zone of the ocean have excellent visual capabilities, while others are able to create their own light to attract prey or a mating partner. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 219, number 30. Human innovation in agriculture has unlocked modifications in apples, tulips, and potatoes that never would have been realized through a plant's natural reproductive cycles. This cultivation process has created some of the recognizable vegetables and fruits consumers look for in their grocery stores. However, relying on only a few varieties of cultivated crops can leave humankind vulnerable to starvation and agricultural loss if a harvest is destroyed. For example, 1 million people died over the course of 3 years during the Irish potato famine because the Irish relied primarily on potatoes and milk to create a nutritionally balanced meal. 3. In order to continue its symbiotic relationship with cultivated plants, humanity must allow for biodiversity and recognize the potential drawbacks that monocultures of plants can introduce. Planting seeds of all kinds, even if they don't seem immediately useful or profitable, can ensure the longevity of those plants for generations to come. A balance must be struck between nature's capacity for wildness and humanity's desire for control. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 219, number 31. Relativity works as a general mechanism for the mind, in many ways and across many different areas of life. For example, Brian Wansink, author of Mindless Eating, showed that it can also affect our waistlines. Mindless eating. Brian Wansink. We decide how much to eat not simply as a function of how much food we actually consume, but by a comparison to its alternatives. Say we have to choose between 3 burgers on a menu, at 8, 10, and 12 ounces. 8, 10, 12. We are likely to pick the 10-ounce burger and be perfectly satisfied at the end of the meal. 10. But if our options are instead 10, 12, and 14 ounces, we are likely again to choose the middle one, and again feel equally happy and satisfied with the 12-ounce burger at the end of the meal, even though we ate more, which we did not need in order to get our daily nourishment or in order to feel full. 10, 12, 14, 12. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 219, number 32. Philosophical activity is based on the recognition of ignorance. The philosopher's thirst for knowledge is shown through attempts to find better answers to questions even if those answers are never found. At the same time, a philosopher also knows that being too sure can hinder the discovery of other and better possibilities. In a philosophical dialogue, the participants are aware that there are things they do not know or understand. The goal of the dialogue is to arrive at a conception that one did not know or understand beforehand. In traditional schools, where philosophy is not present, students often work with factual questions, they learn specific content listed in the curriculum, and they are not required to solve philosophical problems. However, we know that awareness of what one does not know can be a good way to acquire knowledge. Knowledge and understanding are developed through thinking and talking. Putting things into words makes things clearer. Therefore, students must not be afraid of saying something wrong or talking without first being sure that they are right. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 219, number 33. The most powerful emotional experiences are those that bring joy, inspiration, and the kind of love that makes suffering bearable. These emotional experiences are the result of choices and behaviors that result in our feeling happy. When we look at happiness through a spiritual filter, we realize that it does not mean the absence of pain or heartache. Sitting with a sick or injured child, every parent gets to know the profound joy that bubbles over when a son or daughter begins to heal. This is a simple example of how we can be flooded with happiness that becomes more intense as we contrast it with previous suffering. Experiences such as this go into the chemical archives of the limbic system. Each time you experience true happiness, the stored emotions are activated as you are flooded with even deeper joy than you remembered. Your spiritual genes are, in a sense, your biological treasure map to joy. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 219, number 34. Deep-fried foods are tastier than bland foods, and children and adults develop a taste for such foods. Fatty foods cause the brain to release oxytocin, a powerful hormone with a calming, anti-stress, and relaxing influence, said to be the opposite of adrenaline, into the bloodstream, hence the term comfort foods. We may even be genetically programmed to eat too much. For thousands of years, food was very scarce. Food, along with salt, carbs, and fat, was hard to get, and the more you got, the better. All of these things are necessary nutrients in the human diet, and when their availability was limited, you could never get too much. People also had to hunt down animals or gather plants for their food, and that took a lot of calories. It's different these days. We have food at every turn, lots of those fast food places and grocery stores with carry-out food. But that ingrained caveman mentality says that we can't ever get too much to eat. So craving for unhealthy food may actually be our body's attempt to stay healthy. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 219, number 35. Nurses hold a pivotal position in the mental health care structure and are placed at the center of the communication network, partly because of their high degree of contact with patients, but also because they have well-developed relationships with other professionals. Because of this, nurses play a crucial role in interdisciplinary communication. They have a mediating role between the various groups of professionals and the patient and carer. This involves translating communication between groups into language that is acceptable and comprehensible to people who have different ways of understanding mental health problems. This is a highly sensitive and skilled task, requiring a high level of attention to alternative views and a high level of understanding of communication. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 219, number 36. When trying to sustain an independent ethos, cultures face a problem of critical mass. No single individual, acting on his or her own, can produce an ethos. Rather, an ethos results from the interdependent acts of many individuals. This cluster of produced meaning may require some degree of insulation from larger and wealthier outside forces. The Canadian Inuit maintain their own ethos, even though they number no more than 24,000. 2-4. They manage this feat through a combination of trade, to support their way of life, and geographic isolation. The Inuit occupy remote territory, removed from major population centers of Canada. If cross-cultural contact were to become sufficiently close, the Inuit ethos would disappear. Distinct cultural groups of similar size do not, in the long run, persist in downtown Toronto, Canada, where they come in contact with many outside influences and pursue essentially Western paths for their lives. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 219, number 37. Heat is lost at the surface, so the more surface area you have relative to volume, the harder you must work to stay warm. That means that little creatures have to produce heat more rapidly than large creatures. They must therefore lead completely different lifestyles. An elephant's heart beats just 30 times a minute, a human's 60, a cow's between 50 and 80, but a mouse's beats 600 times a minute, 10 times a second. 13060, 5080, 1600, 110. Every day, just to survive, the mouse must eat about 50% of its own body weight. 50. We humans, by contrast, need to consume only about 2% of our body weight to supply our energy requirements. 2. One area where animals are curiously uniform is with the number of heartbeats they have in a lifetime. Despite the vast differences in heart rates, nearly all mammals have about 800 million heartbeats in them if they live an average life. 8. The exception is humans. We pass 800 million heartbeats after 25 years, and just keep on going for another 50 years and 1.6 billion heartbeats or so. 2585016. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 219, number 38. Interest in ideology in children's literature arises from a belief that children's literary texts are culturally formative, and of massive importance educationally, intellectually, and socially. Perhaps more than any other texts, they reflect society as it wishes to be, as it wishes to be seen, and as it unconsciously reveals itself to be, at least to writers. Clearly, literature is not the only socializing agent in the life of children, even among the media. It is possible to argue, for example, that, today, the influence of books is vastly overshadowed by that of television. There is, however, a considerable degree of interaction between the two media. Many so-called children's literary classics are televised, and the resultant new book editions strongly suggest that viewing can encourage subsequent reading. TV. Similarly, some television series for children are published in book form. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 219, number 39. The United Nations asks that all companies remove their satellites from orbit within 25 years after the end of an 25. This is tricky to enforce, though, because satellites can, and often do, fail. To tackle this problem, several companies around the world have come up with novel solutions. These include removing dead satellites from orbit and dragging them back into the atmosphere, where they will burn up. Ways we could do this include using a harpolite, catching it in a huge net, using magnets to grab it, or even firing lasers to heat up the satellite, increasing its atmospheric drag so that it falls out of orbit. However, these methods are only useful for large satellites orbiting Earth. There isn't really a way for us to pick up smaller pieces of debris such as bits of paint and metal. We just have to wait for them to naturally re-enter. MTC. Good job. Start. Number 40. Music is used to mold customer experience and behavior. A study was conducted that explored what impact it has on employees. Results from the study indicate that participants who listened to rhythmic music were inclined to cooperate more irrespective of factors like age, gender, and academic background, compared to those who listened to less rhythmic music. This positive boost in the participants' willingness to cooperate was induced regardless of whether they liked the music or not. When people are in a more positive state of mind, they tend to become more agreeable and creative, while those on the opposite spectrum tend to focus on their individual problems rather than giving attention to solving group problems. The rhythm of music has a strong pull on people's behavior. This is because when people listen to music with a steady pulse, they tend to match their actions to the beat. This translates to better teamwork when making decisions because everyone is following one tempo. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 219, number 41. In this day and age, it is difficult to imagine our lives without email. But how often do we consider the environmental impact of these virtual messages? At first glance, digital messages appear to save resources. Unlike traditional letters, no paper or stamps are needed, nothing has to be packaged or transported. Many of us tend to assume that using email requires little more than the electricity used to power our computer. Overlook the invisible energy usage involved in running the network, particularly when it comes to sending and storing data. Every single email in every single inbox in the world is stored on a server. The incredible quantity of data requires huge server farms, gigantic centers with millions of computers which store and transmit information. These servers consume massive amounts of energy, 24 hours a day, and require countless liters of water, or air conditioning systems, for cooling. 4. The more messages we send, receive, and store, the more servers are needed, which means more energy consumed, and more carbon emissions. Clearly, sending and receiving electronic messages in an environmentally conscious manner is by no means enough to stop climate change. But with a few careful, mindful changes, unnecessary CO2 emissions can easily be avoided. CO2. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 219, number 43. There once lived a girl named Melanie. Melanie. She wanted to be a ballet dancer. One day, Melanie's mother saw her dancing with the flawless steps and enthusiasm of a ballerina. Melanie. Isn't it strange? Melanie is dancing so well without any formal training. Her mother said. Melanie. I must get her professional lessons to help her polish her skill. The following day, Melanie accompanied her mother to a local dance institute. Melanie. Upon meeting the dance teacher, Mr. Edler, her mother requested to admit Melanie to his institute. Mr. Edler. Melanie. The teacher asked Melanie to audition. Melanie. She was happy and showed him some of her favorite dance steps. However, he wasn't interested in her dance. He was busy with other tasks in the dance room. You can leave now. The girl is just average. Don't let her waste her time aspiring to be a dancer, he said. Melanie and her mother were shocked to hear this. Melanie. Disappointed, they returned home, tears rolling down Melanie's cheeks. Melanie. With her confidence and ego hurt, Melanie never danced again. Melanie. She completed her studies and became a school teacher. One day, the ballet instructor at her school was running late, and Melanie was asked to keep an eye on the class so that they wouldn't roam around the school. Melanie. Once inside the ballet room, she couldn't control herself. Melanie. She taught the students some steps and kept on dancing for some time. Unaware of time or the people around her, she was lost in her own little world of dancing. Just then, the ballet instructor entered the classroom and was surprised to see Melanie's incredible skill. Melanie. What a performance! The instructor said with a sparkle in her eyes. Melanie was embarrassed to see the instructor in front of her. "Melanie." "Sorry, ma'am," she said. "For what?" the instructor asked. "You are a true ballerina." The instructor invited Melanie to accompany her to a ballet training center, and Melanie has never stopped dancing since. Melanie. Today, she is a world-renowned ballet dancer. MTC. Good job.